Welcome to the Memory Alpha podcast. We are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Star Trek Wiki. Today with Andy Polistaitis, creator and co-author of We Have Engaged the Borg. Alex, known as Schisma on Memory Alpha with more than 38,000 contributions, and the legendary Bernd Schneider, creator and maintainer of Ex Astris Scientia, the website known for its detailed articles and information about the Star Trek universe. And of course with Jan and Florian. Welcome to the 5th season of the Memory Alpha podcast. We are celebrating the 20th anniversary of Memory Alpha. I'm Florian, and together with Jan, we started the German Memory Alpha back in 2004. The original, the English Memory Alpha, started in November 2003, and that's why today, or in this year, 2023, it's the 20th anniversary. Today we have great guests. We have Schisma, or Alex, who is a German Memory Alpha archivist. We have an author, Andy, who wrote the book We Have Engaged the Borg. And we have the great Bernd Schneider, who is webmaster of the great Star Trek website Ex Astris Scientia, or is it pronounced differently?
You could say Scientia, or you could simply use the acronym EAS.
Okay, I understand. Alex, let's start with you. You are known as Schisma in Memory Alpha in the German version as well as the English version. Can you tell me a little bit more about you?
I think I joined in the early aughts somewhere. I think I learned about the existence of Wikipedia, and I found it an interesting idea. And I thought there should be something like that about Star Trek, because I was a huge Trekkie back then. I think I just Googled Wikipedia Star Trek, and it was the first thing that came up. And there was also a German version. I don't know, I got into vector graphics software, and I thought I could contribute vector graphics. And then I became administrator and
Yes, exactly. So, and I also do remember the great graphics that you created from all the different chips and made these as an attribution to all the pages.
Andy, what about you? Do you have any connection to Memory Alpha?
No official connection outside of a big fan, big user. You know, I couldn't have written the book without the resources such as Memory Alpha, Memory of Beta, and of course Bernd's fantastic Wolf 359 overview from EAS. Honestly, without that, this would have been nigh on impossible. But yeah, it's just, having that sort of a resource to hand where you can go through the website and, check and cross-reference and just 60 years effectively worth of canon and then all of the stuff in the books as well, and in the computer games and in the DC comics. Because yes, I have references to all of those in the book, and just trying to create a cohesive narrative. I couldn't have done this 20 years ago before Memory Alpha. I'd be sitting there with the Okuda's big encyclopedia, but
yeah, we already mentioned Bernd quite some point, so I think he doesn't need any introduction, but for those who don't know him, this great page is a vast collection of all of Star Trek. It was around when GeoCities was still around, so this is predating Memory Alpha as one of the sources for all Star Trek knowledgeable stuff. And he has several subpages actually, like Masao Okazaki's Starfleet Museum, Advanced Starship Design Bureau, Journal of Applied Technology, and Cannon Fodder. And one of the pages is actually about the Wolf 359 research project. So this is the link why we have this bundled here. Bernd, how did any of these projects start?
So it all started in 1998, but maybe I have to go a bit further back to 1996 when First Contact came out, and I was just connected to the internet at the university, and what do? You search for things that interest you, and just typed Star Trek, and there's already stuff on the new movie, and that got me really hooked at the time. I looked up the daily news on the movie, and at some point the movie was great. Still my favorite today. First Contact. And at some point, I decided, okay, I want to do my own thing, and I created EAS. Started very small with like a few hundred kilobytes of data. So the side projects you already mentioned, Jan, they were created, I think, from 1998 to 2005. One after another, and so here we are today. I'm still here after 25 years.
And you are only doing it by yourself, or do you have contributors? Do you have a team, a group of helpers, or how does it work with Ex-Astris?
A lot of contributors. Actually, the most important one is no secret. It's Jörg Hillebrand, and you already talked with him. Was most entertaining video what I saw so far. Of course, he still knows a lot more than I do. He notices the tiniest details in episodes that no one else catches, and of course that is invaluable. And he contributed the alien ship articles, the TNG observations, and the most of the articles on symbols and logos, and we usually work together in a way that he writes up something, packs images into his email and sends it to me. So I do the conversion to HTML.
And Ex-Astris is only dealing with the canon content of Star Trek, is it?
Yeah, so everything with the formerly black background, now a dark gray. So that deals with the canon Star Trek, and the other projects like Starfleet Museum or Advanced Starship Design Bureau. They have a distinct design, and they are fan fiction.
Speaking of fan fiction, Andy, you already talked in the previous discussion we had before the recording, talked a little bit about Canon and Voyager, for example, that there were some problems with the Canon story.
Problems with Star Trek Voyager and Canon. Let's not go. Let's not go kicking that anthill just right now. It's still quite early in the day, and I don't have a beer with me. No, I mean, one of the things when you're trying to weave, 60 odd years of Star Trek canon into a single narrative, is the writers, for the large part, will obey a single creed. Is that they want to tell a story they want to tell. They're not going to get too hung up on the canon. Obviously Spock is a Vulcan. Kirk is captain of the Enterprise for that period. The Enterprise is a Constitution-class starship. These are facts, and these will remain. But everything around the edges, they're not going to let that get in the way of telling a story. So when it came to Voyager, and Voyager being off in the Delta Quadrant, eventually they came up against the Borg. We all knew it was going to happen, and so it did so. But then what you started having was, there was the episode Infinite Regress, I think it is, where 7 of 9 starts manifesting all these personalities that people have been assimilated. And all of a sudden, she's talking about a civilian ship in the middle of Wolf 359. And it's like, okay, Why is there a civilian ship in the middle of Wolf 359? I've got to account for that now. I've got to, explain what that was doing there. Because what I tried to do with the book, and I think this is perhaps similar to Berndt's philosophy on the site, is you want to treat it like it's a real universe. You want to treat it like these are real starships, that things make sense to an extent. And so, part of the fun for me was trying to explain, why were the civilians on the ships at Wolf 359? Why did they only send 40 starships when demonstrably 3 years later they have thousands upon thousands of starships? You can't build ships that quickly. So where did they all come from, or where did they go even? Yeah. It was the challenge of just when you thought you had your narrative locked, and I knew what ships were going to be at 359 and the stories. Then along comes an episode of Star Trek Voyager and a guy says he was on the Excalibur that was assimilated in late 2360. And it's like, well, the Excalibur's not at Wolf 359. So where did that happen? And then I had to go off and weave that in, which was actually quite a fun little side story. You're not going to go into a book and you say, well, you're wrong here because this didn't happen because it's not in the thing. I can give you the most egregious example if you want, is the USS Endeavour. Now, the USS Endeavour, a lot of people will cite as this is the ship which survived Wolf 359 because Janeway quotes a log from a Captain Amazov, and in the log he quotes that it is his opinion that the Borg are the most evil beings as close to evil as we possibly can do. So everyone takes that as, you see, the Endeavour's the ship which survived Wolf 359. But there's nothing in the log which says it was the ship that survived Wolf 359, and there's no evidence outside of that. So I made a different creative choice there. And the three comments I get on this book more than any other, seriously, are number one, the USS Endeavour was the ship that survived Wolf 359. Number two, the Akira-class starship was built to fight the Borg. It didn't come around any earlier than that. And there was no Parliament-class starships prior to their appearance in 2380, because it would appear that a lot of Star Trek fans don't have image permanence. So if you don't see it, it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about not seeing it, so how did you approach this? Did you first pull up a couple of Memory Alpha articles and then go back to watching the episodes to confirm, or was it the other way around? How did you? What was the scheme of producing this?
I grew up as a huge Star Trek fan. I saw Best of Both Worlds back in. Well, it was his first one in the UK, so that was probably around 92, 93, something like that. So, it's been living rent-free up here for, close to 30-odd years. Berndt's site was a huge inspiration when because he has the Wolf 359 research project where he's gone through and identified not only all the ships which are mentioned in canon that we see are there, but also the remains of the ships which are in there. So, they always use studio models, and there's the Constitution-class hull from Star Trek 3, and that kind of gives you some more there. But I think it only comes to is it about 22 in total, Bernd? It's something like that. After that, it just kind of I asked the question of, well, that's some of the ships at Wolf 359. There was 40 ships there. Where are the rest of them? So that just kind of started the little gray cells started forming, and I wanted to know the other ships. And then once I had that, I was like, okay, well. A lot of this book came around from just pulling on a thread. Like I said earlier, you have to explain why they only sent 40 ships to Wolf 359 when you get to the Dominion War, which is, 4 or 5 years later on, they have fleets of thousands of starships with Galaxy Wings and Excelsiors and all this going on there. So what happens in between? How do you get from 40 starships, huge blow to the Federation, it's effectively game over, to, we're just, Battle of Chintoka, ships blowing up all over the place. And you start pulling on this thread and trying to explain it and try to make sense of it and treating it as a real world, what would happen. And then it snowballed a little bit. And next thing you know, I have 500 pages of Borg stuff.
Just one question. What do you make of the USS Constance?
The USS Constance didn't bother me too much because I'll give you a story about Picard season 3. But so when Picard season 3 was about to drop, I have a number of friends who were privileged enough to receive screeners for season 3. So all of a sudden, I've got them coming up to me saying, "Oh, they talk about Wolf 359 in the new season," thinking I'm going to be ecstatic and I'm going to be really excited. I'd kind of done the bulk of the story. I was deep in editing at that point. No, I was terrified because all of a sudden it's like, what do I do? You're touching Wolf 359 now? Are we time traveling back to it? Are you going to retcon a load of it? And then the Constance's fine because it's a Constellation class starship. It's period appropriate to be there, and we have a lot of ships we could do it. I just renamed another starship, which I'd already put in my fan things. But no, what annoys me more about Picard season 3 is this virus that apparently showed up in episode 1, but changed everything to a 3, and it's just like, okay, fine. So I have a throwaway line in there from Shelby saying it was stupid, it didn't affect anything, we rebooted from backups, and then we were fine. But it was just like, it seemed lazy. But yeah, the constants didn't bother me.
Why did you want to write a book about Wolf 359 in particular? What was your interest in this?
It's, in my opinion, it's the most pivotal moment in the history of Star Trek. You know, to draw the analogy to the real world, it's the equivalent of Pearl Harbor or 9/11. You know, in terms of the impact on the world of Star Trek, it is a key moment, and it's a key moment for 2 reasons. One is, you know, in universe, the Federation goes from effectively like 70 years of peace, where, you know, it was the top. It was the top tier power in the Alpha Quadrant. Nothing could really touch it. And it was effectively untouchable. You had, you know, the 2360s, the early 2360s are this golden age for the Federation, where they're building huge research ships to go out and, you know, explore the galaxy. And everything after Wolf 359, though, you know, things start to, I suppose we could say, mirror what's happened in the real world, you know, in the 21st century, where that moment where it felt like we were past the end of history, you know, to quote Fukushima, it's become much more tense and, less comfortable. But in universe, it was around the sort of period where Gene Roddenberry's health got to a point where he could no longer influence the show and the direction it take. And, you know, Gene was very clear that the Federation is a utopia. You know, we do not have conflicts between humans. Generally, everyone gets along pretty well. And so the type of storytelling changed after season 3 of The Next Generation. You know, that's when we started to meet the Cardassians. We get Deep Space Nine coming along, we get Voyager, and the entire kind of tone shift is, in my estimation, a response to Wolf 359. And I think the fact that we're here 30 odd years later, and, you know, even in universe with Picard season 3, it's still talking about it. You know, it's still this pivotal moment.
Bernd, talking about the Wolf project on your website, how did it come along? Did you start it, or was it started by your contributors?
I can't tell exactly. It was sometime in 1998, 1999, when there was talking about, I think, at the Flare forums, and they still exists today. There was talking about the best of both worlds and trying to identify the wreckage. And there was more like a rumor of what models have been present. Most notably, a slideshow that Mike Okuda showed at a convention. There was a verbal description of the slideshow. And so some fan designs were created, I think, for the Rigel class, similar to the Galaxy class. So there were first attempts to reconstruct what is visible on screen. We tried to bring it together. The description and the screen caps, at the time, screen caps were bad, because the only medium was, at the time, I think, VHS. DVDs came out a bit later. Screen caps were really blurry, and they didn't really allow to recognize anything. You could kneel in front of the TV and try to make out details. We actually did that, but it was all quite inconclusive. So at some time, I don't know who it was, but someone approached Mike Okuda. Can we talk about Wolf 359? And he gave us quite valuable answers. He gave his own description of the slideshow, which was different from what was reported so far. At some point, we also managed to get a few pictures of the ships that were actually present, like the USS Chekhov, so these ships all popped up one by one and were included in the article.
Andy, and you invented some new ships or new characters for the book, or did you just rely on what was on Memory Alpha or Memory Beta?
Oh, I had to create new ships because we know there were 40 starships that were present at Wolf 359. So I took the list off of Bernd's site of the ones that we had been positively identified. And yeah, I think it comes to about 20 or so names.
Yeah.
So 17
right.
in total. And so after that, it was a case of fleshing it out myself. And I knew I wanted the USS Hood to be the, spoiler alert for the book I've written about an event 30 years ago, but I wanted the Hood to be the survivor for narrative reasons. And it's been suggested the Hood had been at 359 in other media, what have you. So that was one of them. After that, it was just, I could make up pretty much whatever ship names I wanted to. So one of the things I tried to do is I tried to avoid just kind of Western Navy sounding names. I wanted to include names which, a bit more representative of other cultures on Earth, but also other members of the Federation. So, we have the USS Saleya, named after Mount Saleya. We had a Shran, because everyone needs a Shran in their fleet at some point or another. And yeah, we just kind of, fleshed it out. It was a lot of fun. There's a few Easter eggs in there. There's some references to other ships from other genres and other series is in there, but there's USS Righteous as well, because I loved the Star Trek board game when I was a kid growing up. The full motion video one with John Delancey, so I had to have the Righteous in there as well. But yeah, but by and large, it was just made it up as I went along.
I just vaguely remember the Borg game. Jan, did you play the Borg game?
No, I didn't play that one.
We played other Star Trek games, didn't we?
Yeah, Judgment Rights.
Well, the great thing about Star Trek Borg is it's an FMV game, so they basically filmed an episode, and at periods you can interact with it. I maintain it's John Delancey's best performance as Q is in that game, and you can watch it on YouTube. It's well worth it, but it is hilarious. If you get some time, go and just watch the video because it's great.
I remember the quote:
"Was hit by an unknown Borg weapons discharge and vaporized. Vaporized."
Vaporized.
You got a task to go to something. You take the wrong direction, and you walk out into a corridor, and all of a sudden Q is there in a Hawaiian shirt with a hat, 2 women on his arm, and then the ship's captain comes out in a steward's outfit, serves him a drink, and then walks off. And Q just goes, "Why?"
"Because I can."
And then pushes you back into the turbo lift. So yeah.
Shizma, what about you? Did you remember anything about the Wolf 359 incident? Have you seen it on TV when it was shown for the first time on German television? Or do you have any recollections of engaging the Borg, so to say?
I think when I first became Trekkie, it was like maybe when Voyager started. And I think The Next Generation was on rerun at the time. And I can remember there was a lot of talk about Wolf 359, and it was like a very pivotal moment, as you say. But I must say, like, the episode is gorgeous, of course, but I remember that I was a little disappointed. Like, we didn't see any of that. Like, that was a little disappointing. But on the other hand, like, they could have ruined it. Like, they could have made it a pew Star Wars incident, and they didn't. And I think that's mostly a good choice.
From the production point of view, it was a very great effort to show us so many chips, and maybe that was the reason why they couldn't include a great battle, because it was already difficult enough to have so many Star Trek models. Let's not forget that was real model work at that time. There was no computer graphics or something like that.
Motion control photography. So if you watch a video how it was done at the time, you can easily understand the limitations. So for motion control photography, you have the Starship model mounted on a rod. You move it on some kind of rail, and you can make passes across the camera. There were a lot of different passes filmed to have some diversity in the shots. If you need 2 starships, you have you can film them at once, or you have to assemble increasingly complicated scenes. Because each pass, even if it's just a single starship, is filmed several times.
Yeah,
And,
they took
and
several
gives,
passes with internal lighting, external lighting, all
exactly.
the shadows
Yeah.
and other effects. Yes, yes.
And it explains why in a classic Star Trek everything is more or less moving in one plane. It has mostly technical reasons. There's no up and down in space, but if you move a starship, okay, you can't move it in all kinds of directions.